your thoughts start multiplying exponentially. You go from what should I do to all of these. What if this goes wrong? What if I'm sorry later and I regret the decision? What if I'm not ready to make a decision? What if I don't have all the information I need? What if I mess everything up? And at that point, right now, you're not thinking, you are spiraling. Hi, my friend. Welcome to the Bounce Back Black Woman podcast. I'm Dell, and I've overcome some of the most devastating heartbreaks I could ever have imagined. Do you find yourself stuck in sadness after a broken heart, asking God, why me? Well, I'm here to help women just like you heal and build the resilience to overcome life's greatest hurts. If you long for joy and confidence again, this podcast is for you. So grab your headphones and those heartbreaks. Let's talk. Hey there, my friend, and welcome back to this episode of Bounce Back Black Woman. I want to start us out today by asking you a question. Have you ever thought about something so much and so long that by the time you were done thinking about it, you felt completely overwhelmed and even more confused than when you began, and you still didn't even take action? Yeah, that's what we're talking about today, because this is more common than you even realize. And the reason that it's common, particularly for us, is because overthinking can feel productive. It can feel like you're being careful and considerate and intentional because you're trying to make the right decision. But in reality, overthinking can quietly keep you in the same place for far too long. I was working with a client this past week, and she was trying to make a decision in her life. And she just kept saying to me, Del, I need to think about this a little bit more. We kept coming back to it. And the more that she thought about it, the more overwhelmed she became. And at one point, she said something that really stood out to me. And it stood out because I could see myself there in the past, and I could see so many others that I've talked to and worked with in that same place. Here's what she said that stood out. I feel like I'm spiraling, like a broken internet link that just keeps buffering and buffering, going round and round, but nothing ever actually loads. And when I tell you, that was one of the best analogies that I could have made up or reached for, and she said it, clear as day. And wow, as we started unpacking it, it just became clearer and clearer that the issue wasn't the decision itself. It was happening underneath all of her thinking and overthinking. And the truth is that this isn't just her issue. It's way more common than we realize, because this is something that many of us do. It usually goes something like this. So you're faced with a decision and you start thinking it through. Then all of a sudden fear shows up. Fear that you might make the wrong choice. Fear of failure. Fear of being judged by others about your choice. Fear that you don't have all the answers or the information that you need to make the choice in the first place. And when I tell you, my friend, that once fear enters the picture, your thoughts start multiplying exponentially. You go from what should I do to all of these. What if this goes wrong? What if I'm sorry later and I regret the decision? What if I'm not ready to make a decision? What if I don't have all the information I need? What if I mess everything up? And at that point, right now, you're not thinking, you are spiraling. Here's something that I want you to hear, and hear loudly. Overthinking is often, most often, fear trying to protect you. But fear is doing it in a way that keeps you stuck. Because here's the truth. If you never decide, if you never risk being wrong, if you never take that chance with good enough, you will also never move forward. And here's where anxiety comes in. Because your mind is running all these scenarios, your body starts responding like all of those things are actually happening. Your heart rate changes. Your energy drops. You lose focus and you feel overwhelmed. You feel unsettled and nervous. You feel mentally noisy. All kinds of thoughts just keep firing off in your brain. And so now you're not just thinking. You're actually not thinking rationally at all. You're carrying the weight of thoughts that aren't even real yet, my friend. They're not real. They're hypotheticals. They're fear. They're what ifs. They are low percentage probabilities. And that combination, that is what creates what I call analysis paralysis. So, what do we do now that we know that? We have to figure out how to interrupt the spiral, how to learn how to interrupt ourselves when we see our brains starting that spiral. Because if we don't do that, our thoughts just keep running unchecked. So the next time you catch yourself spiraling, here is what I want you to stop and ask. Here's the first question. How true are the assumptions I'm making right now? And I would recommend that you actually stop, and as long as you're not going to look crazy to anyone around you, ask yourself that out loud. Because I've done that. I've stopped and I've said, okay, get a grip, Del. How true are these assumptions really? The next question I want you to ask yourself is, are these thoughts coming from a place of fear or from a place of actual knowledge? That's an important one. Sometimes it might be actual knowledge, but I bet you more times than not, you're going to answer that they're coming from fear. And here's the third question that you're going to ask yourself also out loud. What if these are just my thoughts talking and not the truth? Yeah, that's a big one. That's a deep one. What if these are only my thoughts and not the truth? Because we treat our thoughts like they're facts most of the time. Because in our heads they seem real, but they haven't shown themselves in reality to be truth or facts. Most of the time they're just our fear talking. And then here's the final thing that I want you to ask yourself. What if I replaced that thought with something else? So take a deep breath, because that is a lot that I just threw at you. You may have to go back and re-listen or rewind this episode to be able to jot these down, because trust me, in that moment when you begin overthinking, you're not going to remember these questions, but these are the exact ones that you need to stop and ask. So we're going to talk about thought reframing now. Instead of thinking, I'm going to mess this up, what if your new thought became, I'm learning as I go? What if instead of thinking, I don't have everything figured out, your new thought became, I don't need to have everything figured out in order to take the one next step? What if instead of thinking, what if this goes terribly wrong, you had a different thought? And that thought was, what if this works out even better than I expect it will? Now, I want to be clear. So listen as I say this. This is not about pretending that fear isn't there. Fear will always be there. It is a valid emotion and mindset that God gives us when we need to be fearful of dangerous things, but it's not always necessary when we're making decisions. This is not about erasing fear completely, but this is more about not letting fear be the only voice that you listen to. And that's the trap that we fall into too often. So, why does overthinking hurt us? Overthinking hurts because it's exhausting to our minds, our bodies, our nervous system, and even our hearts. Because you're constantly in motion mentally, but you're not going anywhere in reality. And that gap, my friend, that gap between thinking and doing is where frustration lives. That gap is where self-doubt grows. And that gap is where anxiety creeps in and makes a home. And over time, that's what makes you feel like something is wrong with you, when in reality, you've just been stuck in a loop of overthinking. And sometimes it's that loop that is the very thing that keeps you from moving forward. Not because you don't want to in your heart, but because your mind won't let you settle down long enough to actually take a first step. 2 Timothy 1:7 reminds us of this. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. I'm going to repeat that one because that's one to tuck away. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. A sound mind, not a racing one, not an overwhelmed one, not one filled with fear-based assumptions and what-ifs. So here's what I want you to do the next time you catch yourself overthinking. First thing I want you to do is pause and take a deep, steadying breath. Breathe in and fill your lungs and clear your mind, and slowly release that breath until you feel a bit steadier. And then you're going to ask yourself, what am I actually afraid of right now? Like, is World War III going to break out if I make the wrong decision? What am I actually afraid of? The second thing I want you to ask yourself is this thought that I have in my head true, really? Or is this just some made up truth that I've told myself for protection or familiarity? And the last question is this: what is one small, tiny step that I can take, even if I don't have everything figured out? Maybe it's the thing that you originally thought about. Maybe it's a little bit smaller, and that's okay. But taking one small step will get you on the path forward. Because clarity doesn't always come from thinking more. Clarity comes from starting to move. And then you start to see the direction more clearly. You can't see it when you're standing still because every direction is available to you. So, my friend, here's what I want you to take away from this episode. And I know I threw a lot at you, so I would encourage you to go back and re-listen. Maybe not right now, but in a few hours or days, because repetition will help it sink into your mind and your heart. So, your mind can convince you that more thinking equals more control, but it does not. It doesn't change the amount of control you have. Sometimes more thinking just creates more fear. You don't need to have every answer before you take the next right step. You don't. You don't need certainty before you begin moving. And you definitely don't need to stay trapped in a loop that is exhausting you. Take a breath with me. And if today's episode resonated with you, if you found yourself anywhere in that spiral of thinking, second guessing, or feeling unable to move, I created something to help you get a little bit more clarity. It's called How Stuck Are You? Because maybe you're not stuck in situations, but you're stuck in your own mind and your own thinking pattern. This will help you see whether you are feeling slightly stuck or somewhat stuck or seriously stuck, and what that might be showing you about your life right now. You can take it right on your phone. You can go to bouncebackblackwoman.com and take it there. And as we get closer to episode 100, I want to remind you that I'm doing a giveaway. I'm going to be choosing one winner to receive a signed copy of my upcoming book, Ruthless Intentionality, and 2 others will receive a Bounce Back Black Woman t-shirt. So, go to the site, take the quiz. The link will also be in the show notes if you need it there. And that's it. And when you do, make sure that you screenshot your results, because when we get to episode 100, I'm coming back to those results, and I'm going to help you figure out what your results are telling you. And my friend, you don't have to stay stuck in your own head. You don't. There is another way forward. So until next time, I want you to take care of you, all that is you, your thoughts, your heart, and your spirit, and your bounce back. Well, that's it for today, my friend. I really hope this episode inspired, encouraged, or just plain comforted you. If so, please share it with a friend who might be struggling in her own healing journey. And if you take a moment to leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts, you'll help other women find encouragement through their heartbreak. Remember that God is holding your hand along this journey, and guess what? I'm holding the other. Life is short, so bounce back, Black woman.